Okay, we're going to give it just a few minutes. I think maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then I will do your introduction. Okay. If you want to share your title, go ahead and share your screen, and that you can go ahead and do that.
Sure. Let me know when to begin because I can't see the hopping
I know
anymore.
it's tricky, that part. I was just doing the same thing. I will definitely I will introduce you here in just 1 second. I'm gonna give it 1 more minute just to let people shift from where they were into here. Okay, I think we're ready to get rolling. Thank you for joining this second session today. This session is Deploy Your DL Models to Microcontrollers, an Edge Computing Application. We'd like to welcome our speaker today, Vaidishwaran Archana. So thank you so much for giving your talk today and sharing your knowledge. We really appreciate it. And people are popping in and saying hello, but welcome. Yes, you can go ahead and begin as you like. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in from wherever you're joining in from. I'm joining in from Singapore, and it's quite bright and early in the morning here, around 10:30 here right now. So today I'll be talking about deploying your DL models or your deep learning models to microcontrollers and basically an edge computing application. So yeah, a little bit about me just before I begin. So I'm currently an AI engineer at Continental Automotive. I have been a graduate student at NUS. I had quite a journey into tech, I should say, and I started falling in love with machine learning as such way back in 2017, and then I got to work with Sama Technologies as a research engineer, and then went on to actually do my master's in deep learning and smart grids, and just graduated this year. And then I joined AI Engineer, where I'm working in the field of autonomous vehicles and robotics. So I've also been an instructor at Udacity. So I released a course with Udacity called Intel Edge AI for IoT developers. So that got released this year, and it was, and I did the second course on choosing the right hardware for the edge. So what exactly we'll be covering today? So I'll just jump right into what we'll be covering because we have quite a bit to cover. And so first I'll be talking about a little about deep learning and, just give you kickstart, and then move into the applications of deep learning in smart grids and solar energy system. I'm going to try and base my talk around a specific application. And this is one of the things like one of the parts of my thesis, I should say. So I'm just going to talk about the results too and what I acquired, and then, try and understand edge computing from this application. And then make you understand what exactly is edge computing, the advantages and devices, the applications of edge computing in solar energy system, the process of solving any deep learning problem, and then application, which is like detection of soiling in solar panels. So all of what we go through today will lead down to the application. So yeah, what exactly is deep learning? So I'm going to go very quickly over it because I bet most of you know out there. And even if you don't, it's very, I'm just going to go over it very, very in a high level abstract. So when you have a simple neural network or artificial neural network as such, you have just one single hidden layer, input layer and output layer. As you move towards a deep learning neural network, the sort of hidden layers increases. So what does this cause? It causes you to actually have better networks that can learn better from your input values and map it to your output values. And throughout this system of gradients and back propagation, this system learns better and is able to predict better. So when we talk about the evolution of deep learning as such, we have an increase in the depth of the network from an ANN. And there's increase in automation. This means that previously, you can see from the figure, right? You needed someone to manually do feature extraction. Now you don't. You expect the deep learning model to do on its own. And this presence of better computational resources, I think the entire boom of deep learning came into being after, we realized we're going to use GPUs from gaming into, running deep learning models. And we can work on large data and noisy data sets, which is so, I think, crucial, because now we are able to sort of tap into this immense amount of data that's available all across the world. And there's presence of better range and algorithms present to tackle these deep learning problems. So now coming to the main problem that I'll be talking about today is traditional grids as such. So when we talk about traditional grids, what exactly is it? You get electricity at your house, and they either, it depends on where you're from, but most, especially developing nations, still have a traditional grid, let us say. So traditional grids as such are, they're unidirectional in nature, which means that you have a generating station. It generates the power. It can be fossil fuel or thermal or anything else. And then you transmit it via these high voltage transmissions, and then it goes to distribution and distributing centers or stations, substations, and then it goes to industry, commercial, and residential. So all of them require different voltages. So it gets split up like that. Then we talk about smart grids. So when we talk about smart grids, we have like bi-directional flow of power as such. And most importantly, why we talk about smart grid is we are moving away from fossil fuel energy, and we are moving towards much more renewable set of energy like wind, hydro, solar, etc. We also have like control center here, which basically tries to control all the various parts of the smart grid. And we also have an IT center as part of the control center, which basically means that we're trying to use information technology into the grid. And importantly, as a deep learning engineer, we're trying to make sense of the data. And today my talk will be around solar powers as such. So what are the challenges to the current solar energy systems? I talked about one of the advantages, that obviously we're trying to move towards renewable in general. But what are we trying to do here? Firstly, we're trying to handle uncertainties and intermittency of renewable energy, which means that the moment I say solar, it's like imagine it's like a sunflower, right? It just follows the sun. So, you get energy when the sun is up in the day, otherwise you won't. If it rains, you don't get energy again. So, you have to be dependent on this source of energy, which is intermittent in nature. And secondly, when you get, even though fossil fuels are bad for the environment, when you actually derive energy from fossil fuels, they're actually pretty, a lot more than what you get from solar energy. So, you have to use converters or step-up converters to actually help to increase the amount of energy that we're getting from solar energy. So yeah, other challenges include that, we have this immense amount of data available in renewable energy system, which is not tapped into, which I talked about previously. And we have to design these control strategies or this control structure to help make decisions better. So there are various applications of deep learning models in smart grids. Firstly, you can classify customer applications. You can use a CNN model. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritties of CNN, but basically it's an image processing algorithm in the deep learning framework, which helps to classify images. But we can also do that with customer applications, wherein we can, through through data of the energy consumed, we can figure out what sort of appliance that you're using. And we can also find faults in electrical equipment. It's known that I've seen research where the fault can be easily detected up to 93%. So yeah, and then we have other models too. We have recurrent neural network, which is vastly important to solar energy. As I said, it's intermittent in nature. This means we need to predict the power over a period of time, and that is where LSTMs come into play. And so we use load forecasting to sort of predict, okay, if it suddenly rains, what is going to be my load? And we also use renewable energy generation. It's also in the similar lines where we try and predict the generation over time. So yeah, and then we have reinforcement learning algorithms, which means is basically bet at a very high level. It's like, imagine you're throwing a stick to a dog, and every time the dog does something right, it's rewarded for it, and every time it does something wrong, it's given observations. In the same way, the reinforcement learning algorithms work. And so you can use reinforcement learning for dynamic pricing in smart grids. You can also use it for electricity trading and for understanding battery or energy storage systems. So deep learning in solar energy system, as I said, can be used for solar power forecasting. It can also be used to understand the data that we're capturing from sensors. And apart from that, it can be, so a lot of the work that we do with solar energy systems, we realize that we actually store the battery. As I said, you won't have consistent power if you don't have energy storage. So we can find out and we can improve the lifespan of these energy storage systems. And the home, we can also use home assistants, for example, Alexa or Google Assistants. I don't know if it's perfectly done yet, but I think a couple months back, it isn't like, I don't think it's there as a product yet, but I do think it's in the research stage where we try and understand, okay, you've been using your air conditioners for a very long time. So can we ask Alexa to ask you to turn it off at certain parts of the day such that your prices of electricity remains right? So yeah, things like that can be figured out. So yeah, this brings me to edge computing, talking all about smart grids and such, but what exactly do I mean by edge computing, and what exactly does this talk mean when I say deploying DL models to microcontrollers? So as you know, you do a lot of machine learning, deep learning models as such. You run it on servers or run it on really big GPUs that consume a lot of power and also have a lot of, memory present. But what happens when you're trying to deploy models on smaller devices? So this, we have an increase in IoT devices all around us, right from our phones, right? Phones, your tablets, your your TVs, and you go into the, for example, now during the COVID time, especially in Singapore, we have these sensors to understand our temperature. So that is also a based IoT device only. And so what happens is all of these devices generate a lot of data. And if they generate data and sending this data to the server for, doing computation every single time is tedious. So what do we want exactly? We want these small devices to have their own data centers. So this form of computing is actually known as edge computing. And the applications are enormous. So one of the applications is, for example, a self-driving car, right? Imagine a self-driving car is going through a tunnel and, it suddenly needs to apply a brake. Would you want this car, when it applies a brake, especially going through a tunnel, which it might or might not have access to internet, to go to a server and send a signal and then come back? Probably not. You would want it to assess the situation right there and take a decision and apply brakes. So that is one of the key application or implementation of edge computing. So what are the advantages of edge computing? A little you would have already sort of understood through my previous slide. Firstly, we have reduced latency. So this means that, as I took the self-driving car application, this means that every time you press a brake, you don't need to wait for the signal to go to the server. You can do it right there and then. And there's reduced internet bandwidth, what I mean by that is you do not need access to the internet all the time. You do not need access to GCP all the time to run your models. You can run it right there on the device. And there's increased security. So I think this is one of the fundamental advantages of edge computing, although now it's a little scrutinized over in the past couple of months. But yeah, the basic advantage here is that you're able to utilize the data right at the edge and not send it to a cloud server where it can be hacked. And at the end, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the dependence on cloud services as such. So what are the applications of edge computing? So, I was listening to this very famous talk by Daniel, who runs Edge Impulse. So he was talking in this podcast about the fact that, they were running this TensorFlow conference, and they have to be really careful not to say okay Google, because if every time you say okay Google, your phones will pick it up, right? So it's a keyword detection model. What happens is that it runs right on the phone. It does not go to any Google server. It actually picks okay Google, you saying okay Google right on the phone. So yeah. Apart from that, there are also other application. One of it is actually to detect animals in wildlife. So imagine, like, you're trying to deploy these microcontrollers on a track where you're trying to identify an endangered species. There's a lot of work done around that. You can probably check out if you. I think it's done on Hackster. It's a lot of good projects are going on around that too. So yeah, what are the considerations of running models on edge computing devices? Obviously, we have memory requirements. I, told you all the advantages, but when you come to smaller devices, the first thing that comes to your mind is obviously this does not have that much RAM. I have a 4 GB laptop which can run really good models, but now you're giving me a 1 GB device. How am I supposed to run my models? So yeah, larger and more complicated models require more energy, and there's model loading time too, and models require more loading time, and if your memory is not that much, loading time increases. And the inference time, if your models take a long time at inference, then you might as well stick it to the cloud, right? You need models which are efficient enough to run on the edge. So solutions is, don't use large and complicated models. I'll explain further. This means that you're trying to reduce the loading, inference time, and the memory requirement, basically trying to make sure that you do not load the device, and you try to increase your compute power. But that is not always possible, right? So you write very optimized code. And I know a lot of us don't think about it a lot, and we try and copy paste a lot of stuff from Stack Overflow. But when you come to smaller devices, you realize that anything I do is gonna take up its compute. Does it have better heat sinks? Does it have the fan capability to take that? And so you have to think much more in the terms of compute and memory. And there obviously is a better way. This is a huge field of research. There's a lot of work done. So one of the models that are actually tried out is ResNet. I think you must have seen this too, especially if you are like work in the field of deep learning and have used transfer learning. This is, I think, one of the most common networks, ResNet 50. So with ResNet 50 is what happens is it has 50 layers in the model, and it does this thing called the identity mapping, where it takes residual learning from the previous weight layers, from weights from the previous layers, and actually gives it as an identity to the next. So this means that there's residual learning across the layers. So your number of layers and the number of computations actually increases. Whereas when we talk about the edge, we want something which is small. If I tell you that this network has 50 layers and it's doing residual learning, the compute obviously increases. So we want to make sure that we have networks which are smaller. And one of it is called the depth-wise mobile net, which uses the depth-wise separable convolutions. So what that means is that, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritties of the math here again, but what it basically means is that it's able to split up the convolution in such a way that it's not taking that many computations as previously required. And it's a very famous network. I think you can just import MobileNet directly to your code now. And I think MobileNet 2 has also come out. It's a very, like as I said, it's a very famous network by Google, so you can directly use it and try to compare it. And I'll also show you the comparison results. So when we talk about ResNet versus MobileNet, firstly, we're addressing the vanishing and the exploding gradient problems with ResNet, which means that as you go through the network, you have problems of gradients vanishing or exploding, because if the network is large, your gradients will vanish throughout the network, and ResNet sort of counteracts that. And it uses the concept of residual learning through skip connections. And this network was primarily built to keep computational accuracy in mind. What I mean by that is, most deep learning models are now built that we want better accuracy. We don't care how much big it is, but we want to make sure that the training accuracy is really high. It's state of the art, and that's what people go after. So yeah, the ResNet was kept built keeping that in mind. And when we come to lighter networks like MobileNet, the first layer is regular convolution, but then we have depth-wise and point-wise convolution. The end result is our mobile net only has 28 layers, so it is much more efficient. And it requires 8 to 9 times less computation. So now I come into edge computing devices now that I've talked about algorithms as such. So this is a Neural Compute SICK. This is one of the edge computing devices by Intel. It uses a Myriad 10 processor. And the interface is like, it talks to the VPU of the, like, it's basically a visual processing unit, and it interacts with the host device. It's literally a USB device. You can plug and play it. And it has all of these features: image accelerators, dedicated neural compute engine. The most interesting part is it only consumes less than 2 watts of power. And as I said, it's a plug and play USB device. And then we have the FPGA, which is a little more on the higher end in terms of cost and computation. And there's much more flexibility, and it supports bit streams as such and larger networks. It's much more robust, which means that you can keep it on an industrial floor and it will run all the time. You don't have to worry about what it does. And it has wider temperature range, long lifespan, and low latency and high performance. And yeah, we also have like your own systems run on Intel chips mostly. Like, I guess newer systems are coming out with ARM chips now, but yeah, most of the computers or laptops you have run on Intel chips, and the i5 processors are like the most common ones. They're used in many PCs and computers, and they can handle heavy applications. So this is the difference between this versus an NCS or NCS or a FPGA, and it has multiple cores. And the great number of cores actually help for the Intel i5, Intel Xeon to perform better than the i7 counterparts. All you need to understand here that Intel Xeon is a higher end processor than i5. And there's lower power consumption. Though, what Intel states is that Xeon only consumes a TDP of 35 watts versus I think i5 takes up to 140 or close to that. Like, it's a higher TDP. So to use this, you can use one of these applications called Intel Dev Cloud on the Edge. What the Intel Dev Cloud on the Edge basically provides is a way to use development servers to run, your models on various CPU, FPGA, GPU, and VPU. This is exactly what I use because I can't afford all of them. FPGAs, I think on the higher end, it's around 2K. But the neural compute stick is under $100. But in total, if you're someone who can't afford a lot, you can always try this. These devices are already present on the server. You can go and deploy it and try out how your model would look like. And so another very famous board is Edge TPU and Coral Dev board. I'll go really quickly through it. So the Edge TPU is also, it's designed by Google, and it's another low power device. And the Coral Dev board basically uses the Edge TPU as a SoC, and is basically a co-processor. That's it. So what is the process of solving any deep learning problem, right? We get data. This is the last part, do not worry. We get data, we clean and prepare data. So getting data, I guess, is the hardest part of solving any deep learning problem. You get into it and you're like, where do I get this data from? So the data collection is the hardest part. And then you come into cleaning your data, manipulating and preparing it right to actually train your model. And then you decide, okay, which model shall I actually try out? And then you test the data and then you improve upon it. So that's like the basic flow of any deep learning problem. And this is exactly what I followed with detection and classification of soiling in solar panels. So detection of soiling in solar panel using edge computing was one of the applications I used for my thesis. So out here, what happens is that we need a lot of manual labor to clean solar panels. So to help with that, I suggested an edge computing application such that we can actually do this not in an automatic fashion, but at least detect soiling in an automatic fashion in large solar farms. So what I mean by that is when you have a very large solar farm, it's not possible to always notice soiling on solar panels. And when you have soiling on solar panel in the form of dust or ice or bird poop and stuff like that, is that it causes a layer on top of the solar cells, which means your solar efficiency or the efficiency of the solar panel decreases. So that is why you need to make sure that you do not have soiling present on the solar panels. I know it's not a very intuitive application as such, but it also helps to sort of reduce the load or automate some part of the feature, some part of how we deal with solar panels. So for doing that, I use this data set called the PVNet data set, which comprised of around 45,754 images. So this is the first part of the deep learning, solving a deep learning problem, if you remember, which is like, collecting data. So I had good amount of data and with power loss images, and then we classify the data. So, classify the soiling in terms of red, brown, and gray. And it also had timestamp across the month. So, figuring out when the soiling was caused. And for using this, I used a MobileNet and a ResNet for solving this problem. This was the model architecture used. So now we are in the third part of the process where we are trying to figure out how to train the models. So I took the data, I'm training it on an HPC. So one of the things which is very crucial to remember here is that you always do the training on a high performance computing device, but you take the model and you actually deploy it to edge devices to do inference. So only the testing part is the part which is actually run on smaller devices. The model is already trained. So I used, edge TPUs and Intel Dev Cloud. So what was the comparison of results? So as you can see, I ran it on MobileNet and ResNet. So the training loss for MobileNet is actually lesser, and the testing loss for ResNet is lesser. But one of the most crucial things for me was the inference time as such. So if you notice the inference time for me, it's 43 milliseconds for MobileNet versus 119 for ResNet, which means that MobileNet performs at almost half of what ResNet does. So that's very important for running anything on the edge. And then, this is just a graph of the same thing. So then one of the other things I did was, pre-process the image. So I took all the, dust images and I pre-processed it. So this is dust, brown, red, splattered dust, and white dust. And I categorized it into this. So it took me a long time to do this because I was literally doing manual labeling. But I think you also have very cool tools now, like CVAT, which does like automatic labeling if you're interested in that. So this was the entire process. You take the image, you tag it and normalize it, and then you classify it using MobileNet, and you figure out which category it falls into, and then you give the output, which is basically the class. So the training was like I decided to go with MobileNet after the comparison, and then I realized that my accuracy is around 98% and testing is around 96%. It's actually pretty high because the sort of data I had was very clean and processed. You might not have the same when you go to real-time detection. It's obviously going to be a little on the bad side, or like a little lesser than this. This is almost too good to be true. Yeah, but anyway. So the detection also had a part of image segmentation. What I mean by that is through this, I could figure out how much area of the solar panel was actually soiled and calculate the percentage for it. And and we ran the inference over various devices. So you can see, as you can see here, through the graphs, I think it will show well. So the inference time, you'll notice, is quite low on the FPGA and the i5 and the Xeon, which means that I can choose an FPGA over i5, and which means I don't need to go deploy my laptop. I can take the FPGA, which is a small device, and go and deploy it right at the edge. You'll notice that the NCS inference time is high, but you need to understand the trade-off. The cost is less, the power is way less, as I said, 2 watts. So you need to make a decision here. You want less power with a little more increase inference time. Will that work for you? If it does, then NCS is the perfect choice. And and I also ran it on the Edge TPU dev board and the Edge TPU accelerator. So you can notice the time that it took. Here again, MobileNet performs way better. So what exactly could be explored next? So deep learning has immense application, not only in smart grids as such, but when we look into smart grids as such, we have like presence of still problems like forecasting and trading, which can be looked into. But edge computing has immense applications, right? And how do you get into the field? You ask a researcher or developer. You can start by implementing some algorithms on your own, and you can also use some quantum computers for doing that. You can figure out, that's one of the research fields that you can explore next. So yeah, this is just a very high level conclusion that I use MobileNet, and it performed a lot of good tasks. And for future work, we can actually use more data, which is generated right at the edge. And yeah, I want to thank a lot of people, my advisor for giving me the guidance, one of the PhD students at my lab, and Intel Software for giving me the access to Intel DevCloud for the edge. And yeah, thank you so much. And feel free to ask me any questions and reach out to me just in case I don't get to your questions today.
Thank you so much. Folks to drop questions in the chat if they see the chat right now, but I can certainly help out. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, sure.
So Ashma asks, does the inference have to be done on the edge because it's real time, or does it have to be real time? Isn't the Soling data relatively stable?
Okay, so yeah, inference is, as I said, when you talk about edge computing as such, the training is done on high performance computing devices, but the inference is done on small devices, right? Or the microcontrollers as such. So when you take the pipeline, the testing part is always, or the inference part is always done on the edge. You never train your models on the edge because that requires too much computation, which I don't think any edge computing devices currently provides that level of computation for even complex models. So yeah, as you said, the first part of the question, yeah, the inference has to be done right on the edge because and it is real time. So anything you do on the edge will be real time because it will be running on its own. So for example, your algorithm for keyword detection on your phone is sort of always running, or it starts running the moment you say okay Google, so it runs on real time too. So it's similar to that. And isn't soiling data relatively stable? You mean by that I don't have a lot of bad data present, which is true because as I said, I did a lot of normalization. I sat and tagged images, so there were a lot of images which sort of didn't make sense to me. So I went through the manual process of figuring out the images. I don't think in very industry level applications you do have the time for that. So I would suggest tools like CVAT, which do like automatic labeling. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. If not, feel free to ask me more about it.
If there are any other questions, you feel free to drop them in the chat. Archana will be here for a few more minutes, and then the session closes out, I think, in about 5 minutes. And then I believe the next session starts at 10:15. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and speaking for us today. And I don't know if anybody has any questions, just to let everyone know, everything is being recorded, and this will end up being loaded up to YouTube, to the Women Who Code YouTube channel in the future. So I'm going to say goodbye. And Archana, if you want to stay and hang out for more questions, that'd be great.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you for everything.
Feel free to ask me any questions you want. Like, even if it's very basic, like I didn't understand what was edge computing at the end of the day, that's fine too. And I really want to thank everyone who stayed and listened to my talk. And you can always reach out to me. And thank you. Bye, everyone. Do take care.